Cornish wanderings. Interesting features of Cornwall. Some Cornish hobgoblins, bugaboos, gruesome deserted mine stacks, moving a mine bob, grouter and grouter cellars, roadside games, and strange old customs. Enjoy. No power has yet been able to banish the Cornish mysticism and mysteries of a legendary heroic past. Today, as firmly as 5 centuries since, the inner heart of the Cornish man cling to his droll or tale of giants, hobgoblins, and fairy with great tenacity. That's because it holds the key to the real history. And a few of those are interesting by way of illustration. Balerion was formerly the name of Land's End, and also the name of a mighty giant who made it his home. Cormoran built St. Michael's Mount, but was slain by the redoubtable Jack the Giant Killer. Hollyburn of the Cairn defended ordinary mortals from other giants than himself. The giant of Nansaldry principally sustained on little children. The giant Trebigan frightened bad children into virtuous lives and dined off the incorrigible ones, which he usually fried upon a flat rock by his cave door. The giant Blunderbuss, killed by little Tom Hickerthrift with a cart axle, was the embodiment of surly laziness and cruel greed. The giant Wrath, terror of the coast, walked out to sea a dozen miles or so, and fastening the fisherman's boat to his girdle, strode leisurely back to his cave to serve his prisoners up for food at will. Gog Magog lost the kingdom of Cornwall to the Trojan giant Corinius. In the wrestling match, Thunderbone walked the land everywhere, inspiring terror by his awful ugliness, while the mighty Boister, whom Cruikshank endeavored to depict, was so huge that he could stride from St. Agnes Beacon to the top of Carn Bray, a distance of 6 miles. This was the enormous giant who, while nearly killing his wife from overwork, was making love to St. Agnes, who, to rid herself of his opportunities, persuaded Bolster, as a test of affection, to bleed himself to death in attempt at Chapel Porth to fill a hole, which had a secret outlet to the sea, which blood let from a vein in his massive arm. To all Cornish folks, these monsters still live in fireside tales, and the numberless monuments scattered over the rocky tors and wild moors, such as cromlechs, monoliths, and other rude stone monuments, are the household goods and pastimes implements of this vanished but not relinquished race. Every hill or crag has its cairn or crowenlock, every gorge or gean its ghost or goblin. The knowledge of all this takes from possession of the wanderer through Cornwall. If these were not enough to keep alive all manner of weird superstitions, the chimneys of the deserted mines of Cornwall alone would furnish sufficient gruesome influence to create and foster spooks enough for entire people. Anyone who has ever looked upon the dreary round tower puzzles of Ireland will recall the feeling of dread and mysticism they always engender, but these lonely landmarks or former activities seem to possess more dire and forbidden aspect. They usually comprise the tower-like chimney, the old engine room, and the lofty bob shaft. Moving a mine bob is one of the curious performances in the Cornish mining district. The Cornish folk come from miles around to see the mine bob moving. This mine bob is the great beam, the highest place in all huge Corning mining machinery, which works like a steamer beam, the man engine and the man pumps. This one weighing upwards of 118 tons. The marvelous whiteness of all Cornish housewives' floors, tables, chests, and chair have been by constant admiration. I learned the secret on a recent Friday, which day of every week is Grouter Day in Cornwall. You will see numberless donkey carts hurrying up and down the hilly highways or halting before village doors. They are filled with some light and pumice, like substances dug from near hillsides, pits, and are in charge of women, cheery and stout, and half dressed as men, or of boys already full of shrill, whistling in the quiet philosophies of older tradesmen, with loads of gouter for scrubbing floors, which looks like tapioca. One of the most fascinating pleasures of the road in Cornwall will be found in loitering alongside groups of Cornish boys, engaged in their various games. Chief of these are toestones and cob nutting. Both are played wherever the spirit of ominous battle overtakes these sturdy little embryo miners and fishermen, and their pluck, persistency, and pertinacity are unsurpassed. In Toadstone, a diagram similar to the one chalked on deck for ship billiards, with a rounded end like that of a bagatelle board, is drawn in the road, and the game consists in kicking with the left foot, the right foot being always held in the right hand, and round flat stones from the approaching line from one space to another, but never over but one line, clear around the entire 13 spaces and out again, without ever once having dropped the right foot. The little fellows become wonderfully expert in this difficult feat. Cob nutting is an all the year round sport. Much of its zest comes from the dangers of securing the nuts necessary for the year's supply. Common hazelnuts are used. These are got at great risk from the immense copse and forest edges. The prizes with the shucks still on are stored away in the attic and dried with the greatest care, so that the nut fiber becomes hard and hoary. The hazelnuts are allowed to literally fall out of their sheaths. All the round, smooth, ripe, shiny nuts are preserved sacredly for cob nutting. It is often a Cornish boy's entire winter employment and diversion to prepare the cob nuts for the rest of the year's battle for superiority with his fellows. The sport takes its name from the cob or shell of the nut. The cob nuts are prepared by boring a hole through each side of the nut, removing the kernel and filling the hollow shell with lead or shoemaker's wax, the latter being preferred. The shoemaker of the village is consequently an almost revered personage with all Cornish boys. A wax end drawn through the loaded cob or shell and held by a strong knot completes the cob nut, and you cannot find a boy in all Cornwall who has not one ready strung for contest. Ties are drawn for first crack. The loser throws his hat upon the ground and lays his cob nut in a little hollow upon its top. Then the cobber or striker, holding his cob between the ends of his fingers of his left hand and the end of the attached wax and in his right, after many feints, motions, and sights, brings his cob with almost the force of a bullet upon his opponent. One or the other is seated or broken. It is turn and turn about. Generally, one of the lads has his entire stock of reserve cobs destroyed, nor will he then yield. He borrows and begs of his companions to the limit of his power, until perhaps a superior cob is found, and by his spirited cracking he at last triumphs over adversity.